Hello, my name is Eric Putkonen. Thank you for joining me. Today I'm going to talk about there's nothing to identify with in non-duality. Now, depending on the school or the teachings that you have studied non-duality, you may have heard things like you are the self, or you are awareness, or you are consciousness, or some other variation. And then I find people are trying to identify as the self, or awareness, or consciousness, and this is a mistake. Ultimately, there is nothing to identify with. You cannot identify with or as the self. The self isn't really personal in that way. Let me explain. When you identify with anything, you're identifying with content, things, something that's known. Some people identify as a body-mind. Well, they're familiar with their body-mind, the limits of the body-mind, and so they identify with that. You identify with the known. That is a requirement of identification, is you need to know what you're identifying with. Now, what is the self? Well, basically in non-duality, there is no other. There's not two. The self is all-inclusive. Nothing is excluded. That includes what is not known. The unknown is part of the self. And so when we try to identify as the self, we're trying to identify with the known part of the self, which is no longer the self, but a mental concept of the self. The true self has not only the known, but the unknown, and as such, fundamentally cannot be identified with, because you don't know what you're identifying with. Now, it is a reason that I often will say there is no me, is because what I'm saying is there's nothing to identify with. There's no me. An ego, a me, is basically self-image, self-concept, content. And whatever you try to identify with would be just more story or content in some way, even a conceptualized version of self or consciousness or awareness. And I see this all the time, because people will try to identify with the self, awareness, or consciousness, or whatever their term is. And then as they're talking, you could tell their concept of the self, awareness, or consciousness falls short from what it really is. For example, I was talking with somebody the other day online, and they were saying, well, I know that there's only awareness, and I am that awareness. And in the course of the conversation, they proceeded to tell me how, they often feel like a witness and out of control, and trying to, get comfortable with that or overcome the feeling. And as they're talking, you can tell that their concept of the absolute, be it awareness, self, consciousness, whatever, has absolute control. That was a piece of what they believed to be the case. And so I actually shot back that I said, awareness is, as he was using the term, but the self doesn't control everything. The self does not have absolute control. Not everything is decided. Not everything is controlled. And the self has no problem with the lack of control. And I was trying to shift their concept a bit of awareness of the self, because they were building this image and ideology of awareness being all-controlling, and therefore you know, if they had a fear of lack of control, it set up this weird dichotomy within them that they're trying to resolve. But but that's just, you know, they were trying to, but again, they were identifying. They're like, well, I know I'm awareness. Well, they didn't really know their awareness, and the awareness that they were trying to identify with was their conception of it, which will always fall short from the real thing. You know, as they say, the map is never the territory. The map is a depiction of what is known. The territory may have much more than that is unknown. And so as you're trying to identify with the self, what you're really identifying with is your map of the self at that point in time, which is only a shadow of, a rough conception of the self, which may or may not be accurate. So that's kind of the main point that I wanted to put forward today, is the self cannot be identified with, because the self, as it's not exclusive or you know, inclusive of everything, includes also the unknown, and you fundamentally can't identify with what is unknown. But so give up trying to identify as the self. So many people are like, yeah, I know I'm the self. You could tell they've built some self-image into that. You're not the self. At least not that self. That mentally created, imagined self. What you are, what you really are, is beyond all that. Includes the unknown, and is not really personal. And being personal is about a me again, which is just another way to identify. When you take something personally, it's identified with. That's what being personal is it's related to identification. And so the self is not personal. It can't be identified with. So anyways, hope you enjoyed the video. If you think somebody you know might enjoy the video, please feel free to share. If you have any questions, just post them below and I'll try to get to it when I can. If you want to kind of keep in the loop in future videos, please subscribe, and I'll catch you next time. Thank you much.